Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Belvoir Enfield and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit belvoir.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com.
Are increasing mortgage rates and diminishing returns making you feel like perhaps it's worth exploring the north, where the property prices are lower and the yields are higher? Can it really be that simple? This week on Your Lettings Journey, we are exploring the north-south divide. Enjoy!
So this week, I'm joined by Gary Pemberton. Hello, Gary.
Hello.
Hello. Gary is the franchise owner of Belvoir Warrington. And I've invited Gary to join us today because a couple of weeks ago, we had a local landlord, Paran Shah, who was telling us that he was selling his properties in London and investing in properties in the north. Now, he was particularly looking at Liverpool and or potentially Liverpool and also HMOs. But I wanted to get a perspective from an established estate agent in the north. Sorry to sound like a complete Londoner, but somewhere in the north. And I know that Warrington is nearby. Basically about what the market is like up there. And before you answer about the general market, I just wanted to say to everybody that Gary is one of the bigger, more established franchises in Belvoir. So his knowledge both of Warrington as a market and estate agency in general, just to put you on the spot, is really good.
Thank you.
Take it away, Gary. Tell me about what's happening in the Warrington property market at the moment.
So I guess we need to break it down as sales and lettings, Rachel. So from a lettings point of view, we're probably experiencing no different to what the rest of the country is. It's just absolutely bonkers at the moment. Properties are coming on, the rents are rocketing upwards. There is definitely generally a shortage of rental stock in the Warrington area. To give you a perspective of that, if you were to put Warrington into Rightmove and looked at how many rental properties are available literally just before COVID, because we monitor this and we document it in our team meeting every Tuesday, you would think roughly used to come up with about 900 to 1,000 properties available in the Warrington area to rent. Over the whole of the COVID period and still currently, we vary between 100 and 150 properties available to rent. So we've gone from 900 down to probably about a max of about 150 properties available to rent. And you're talking a big conurbation, over 220,000 homes. Warrington is bigger than cities like York and Reading and Peterborough. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of those odd towns that you wouldn't know is so big. So wow. To have roughly 150 properties available to rent in such a big conurbation, it's really tight. But also what we've got here, if you look at Google Maps, we are completely interlinked around us with motorways. Mm-hmm. So beneath us is the M56, above us is the M62, and then to the side of us, which always causes havoc with traffic, is the M6.
Yes.
We've got the Manchester Ship Canal that also comes all the way through Warrington as well. So it is good and it's bad because it brings a bane of trouble for traffic. But what it does do, what I'm trying to say as well, is that the railway lines are there as well. So what it means is that a lot of people who work in Liverpool and Manchester also live in Warrington as well. Because you can be in from Warrington Station into Liverpool, you can be there in 20 minutes. So it's really fast.
Fabulous pitch for Warrington as an area to
did I? Sorry. Yeah.
There's massive demand, no stock, and we're so well connected.
Yeah.
I love it. That was brilliant. That's your 60 seconds B&I pitch is just it's done.
Not even mention employment prospects here yet, have I?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so being so fabulously located, I'm going to guess that you are, number one, from Warrington, and number two, just generally enthused by the property market. So you were always going to be an estate agent.
Yes. Yeah. We do well. Yeah. I can't complain, really. We do well.
So what was it that got you into this, though? What got you into property? Because you're obviously very excited about it all, but what got you there?
Yeah. So I used to work for a very large retailer managing their buying team. And my wife and I started investing in properties. And we thought as landlords that we knew it all. And I wanted to do my own business. So we looked at different models for franchising for lettings, as it was in those days, because we'd been open 15 years, and hit the nail on the head with Belvoir, as it was Belvoir Lettings then, if you remember.
Mm.
And we started the journey. And when I was doing all the training, because I completely reskilled and retrained in my career, and I realised how little I actually knew as a landlord. Even though we're using agents, and we use different agents because of properties in different areas, I realised how little I actually knew. And my passion for property just sort of fueled from there. And my wife and I have invested in properties ever since. And we do the dark world of commercial property as well. We don't do it from a business point of view, but personally, we do commercial property in Warrington because I know the market very, very well.
That was going to be one of my
questions.
questions.
I'm very passionate about property.
Is it just Warrington then that you invest in?
So, yes, my wife and I have got properties over towards Leeds area, Ripon and Rushworth Way, and a bit towards Nantwich. But the bulk of what we do is in the Warrington Runcorn area that is our franchise area.
Okay. All right. So you do know what you're talking about then. You live and breathe it as well. So you're not just enthusiastic, you are. I live it, breathe it, and I invest in it. And actually, when you're talking to customers, and you give an example, we have a huge amount of our landlords have got our own guarantee product. We buy our own rent guarantee product for our own properties to protect our own rent with our own tenants, because I've not got a crystal ball on what's going to happen in the circumstances of my own tenants. And when you can talk from the heart, when you're talking to a landlord about the rent guarantee product and you buy it yourself, when you talk to the landlord and you talk about, because you're a landlord yourself, you can talk about buy-to-let mortgages and insurances and the journey. And as at the moment, if you're on tracker, because I've got two of mine on trackers, the rates have gone like that. They're crazy, Yeah.
But, I've also been paying very little on mortgage about a year ago, for those two properties. So you can have a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding if you're in the game itself. And that's, I think, what gives us a bit of a different edge over the people who are operating in the same market as me in Warrington.
No, I would agree with you there. I mean, particularly with the rent guarantees as well, it's just sort of like would never go without it. Just would never. And when you actually say that's what I do, it makes a big difference to people, because of all people, you should be. People have this feeling that if you've done your referencing correctly, then you're not going to have any problems, and what does it matter? But it's like, no, things change. Things change.
It's a snapshot in time. It's one moment in time. And what's to say that tenant circumstances don't change in 1, 6, 12 months' time? Whether it's a job change, a mental health change, a family change, a health change generally, referencing and engaging if someone's a right tenant for the property, that is literally a moment in time, and it's not a predictor necessarily for the future.
No. And I'm finding a lot at the moment as well, particularly with rents as high as they are. So as you're saying about the stock levels being that much lower at the moment, and the prices then are that much higher, and you also get to that point where the people who are applying are perhaps not the right people for the property, and trying to explain that to people that yes, this person may have a huge amount of money, or may appear to have a huge amount of money, or be offering a lot of money up front. They're not necessarily the right person for this property. And that's difficult. Yeah.
It can be, yes.
We won't go into too much of the detail there, because I will start ranting. I've been doing this recently, and it's just like, no, don't take 6 months up front. Well, yeah, exactly. I do sort of like, no, it's not right. I'm going to tell you this, and then in 6 months' time, you'll be saying, thank you, Rachel. However, so you were talking earlier, I think, about the letting side of things and number of properties available. How is the sales side of things up there as well?
Overall, good. We've actually had, obviously the market collapsed in the last 3 months of last year.
Yeah.
Since there was the bonkers budget, I think it was called, with Liz Truss. I remember listening to the radio on the day after it happened, and an MP turned around and said, it's either brilliant or bonkers. And this MP said, I think it's more bonkers than brilliant, though. And of course, it turned out to be completely bonkers. And the sales market literally fell apart. It goes quiet anyway coming into Christmas, as we both know. Yeah. But it went quiet for the last quarter of last year. And I was relieved that at the beginning of this year, it was sort of the horse bolting out of the stable. It was a really good brisk market at the beginning of the year. Definitely interest rate rises are suppressing it, without a shadow of doubt. That is having an impact. But I think we're just ending up in a more normal market. I think we've got used to, through the COVID period, coming out of the first lockdown in 2020 and then 2021 and 2022. We just were in a bonkers market, and it was stupid. You could put a house on the market and go at the higher end of what you thought it was, and you get offers over and over and over and over. It was crackerjack.
Yeah, it was.
It was nice. It was it was a bit like a roller coaster. It was quite interesting, because you just couldn't predict what was going to happen. It was mad. Whereas I just think now in 2023, we're just into what I call a more normal market. But I would say in Warrington, if you, let's say, an average house price, let's call it 250,000. First time buyer territory up to around that figure roughly is fairly brisk. We had one the other week ago where we had 3 first time buyers bidding against each other, and I'm like, blimey, the market is good, isn't it? It's really good. But then if you go up to sort of 400, 450, 500,000, the pricing of those properties is a bit more sensitive now. Doesn't matter how good the presentation is. It still is a sensitive market, because those are stepping up houses, aren't they? They're moving up. And for sure, if you're going to go and get a remortgage or a new mortgage to step up, it's not cheap at the moment.
You're going to be that much more sensitive. No, I get it. So are you finding it is more at because we've been looking at the 1 and 2 bedroom flat type area for various reasons that I'll come back to. But so we're getting investors and first time buyers who are looking. Are you finding it's predominantly first time buyers with you? Oh no, you've got the same.
Yeah. Funny enough, I've just been with Craig, our sales chap. We've just been doing running some numbers over a property which we're looking to sell for someone I know quite well, and it's on Gorsey Lane, and it'll probably be about 150,000. It's a 2-bed end terrace. It's a cracking property. Actually, needs a little bit of a lick and a kiss and a bit of a tidy up here and there. And I said to Craig straight away, I said, well, this is either going to be an investor or a first time buyer, and you're probably going to have 1 or 2 of them fighting for it. Because if I was an investor and it's a surefire rental property, you're going to get easily 799, probably 850 for that property a month. And if and a first time buyer, it's a perfect sort of property. It's a semi-detached end terrace. It had a little yard at the front. It has a bit of a yard at the back. It ticks a lot of boxes for a first time buyer. It's on a good street, good area. I think that area of the market is still quite brisk, and we still have investors with cash around. Less so mortgages, or if they do have a mortgage or they're lowly geared, they're only maybe borrowing 50%, something like that. But there's a lot of people with money in their pockets out there. And houses are safe as houses.
Yeah,
property safe as houses, isn't it?
I think most of the people down here who have money in their pocket go to my tennis club. They don't seem to work, and they're always on holiday. So it's like a different world. But no, it's interesting that you say that. I was watching or reading an article the other day, because we've obviously been told about landlords leaving the market. And I'd have to say, from our experience, this is something that we are definitely feeling at the moment. So I was going through our books, and I would say we've lost 7% of our rental properties in the past 8 months, let's say 7 or 8 months. Which is obviously more than normal, and we're not getting a mad influx of properties coming back in again, which I think is because a lot of people are trying to cut down on their costs by self-managing or what have you. I'm not sure. Is that something you're feeling up there as well? Are you feeling landlords leaving, or are you not?
Yeah, so we're not immune to what's going on. Definitely there are landlords selling up, selling their properties. They think it's time I think it could be a generational thing. They just want to just cash in. You know what I mean? They've, bear in mind that a lot of people I know, they became our landlords from the 2008 housing crisis and the recession. So now they're able to realise the value of the property back to where it should be. And then, yes, you have got some landlords who are just saying, I don't like the legislation, the market, the way it is now. And there was a Section 24 with the tax changes, to just don't suit them. And they're getting their fairly decent prices for their properties. So they're saying, let's sell. Luckily for us, we're a very much an attraction agent. We attract a lot of new business. So at the moment, and it's a bit of a roller coaster, it's a bit like that. We will end up the back end of this year higher more property numbers than we did at the beginning of the year. So we'll grow this year on managed properties.
That's really
a lot of hard work goes into that. Yeah,
that's interesting. I know you do a lot of attraction, as you say. I know you do that. I met with somebody else from Belvoir last week, and he was saying that he saw a bit of a split, not necessarily between the north and everyone else, what have you. I think probably between the south and everyone else, in that he was saying that all of the Belvoirs in the south are making noises about landlords leaving and stock reducing, but the Belvoirs elsewhere, he's like, they don't seem to be feeling it as much, and this is just the norm. And I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm not sure about that. I think we are losing more, but maybe we need to do more attraction. I'm not sure. Or maybe they're all going north. Maybe they're all going north.
Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt, though, I do feel, and all the numbers and stats are there, that the private rental sector market as a whole, doesn't matter whether it's north or south, the whole market is shrinking. It is reducing. And whether we like it or not, yes, there is interest rate thing that's going on at the moment. But they'll go up and they'll come back down again. They'll settle a new number. That's just a blip in time. But it's definitely government intervention that's affecting the choices of landlords these days, without a shadow of a doubt.
That was another one that I was reading, and this is what I was meaning before, where they were saying that the numbers are going to go down, but the people who are predominantly going to be leaving the market are those with one or two properties, and the people who have the portfolios are more likely to be investing again. So it's a bit of a balance, and I think that's kind of what the government are after anyway, is to get the bigger landlords to continue to build and grow, and to remove the one or two property people. A couple of things that you said earlier as well just hit me. It's the idea that you can buy a 2-bedroom property for 150,000. Hello. And that you can rent a 2-bedroom property for, I think you said $7.99. It's a different world. So I completely understand why someone who, who's invested down here, spent on a 2-bedroom property $350,000, and is renting it out for a good amount more, so say $1,500 a month. But I can completely understand if they're slightly stretched, why they might come up north and get a better return. Unfortunately, and I probably shouldn't say that as an Enfield person. But I mean, you've stayed local with everything, and I know that there are other places, obviously, that do returns that are as good as yours, that are as well connected as Warrington, etc., etc. But for me, I've always thought I need to know know the area that I'm investing in. I like the idea of driving by and saying, I know this house, I know this area, I know the sort of person who's going to live here. I can, if I'm told things are going wrong, I can at least drive by and see what I think. But I'm very safe in that respect. I've been watching a guy on TV. I don't know if you know him. He's called The Wandering Turnip. Have you ever seen The Wandering Turnip?
No. Not seen him, no.
He's really good. I stumbled across him on YouTube. I don't even know the guy's name. He's a Wandering Turnip, and he's from somewhere up towards the north. I'm not entirely sure where, but he does this thing where he goes around the UK and he looks for the cheapest properties in any particular area, and he will go round and look at them. Basically, he'll go around and do a video around this property. I loved it when he came to London, because it's like, these aren't cheap compared to what you've shown everywhere else. These are not cheap. But he was in places like Hull, and I think he was in Bradford and Burnley and doing those sorts of things. And there was lots of stuff that kind of added to the old stereotypical image that we sometimes have, that while there are really nice places in the places that I've just mentioned, there are also areas where if you don't know that area, you'll do it up and it'll be broken into and your boiler will be taken out. Is that true of your kind of area as well?
No, and that's what I was just about to say, that, you know, as an investor myself, there are, and I see these sweat workshops, as I call them, where they will say, give us, 80 grand and we'll give you this return. And you go and actually really look at those properties in those areas. And I don't really want to say the towns, really, because it's not fair for them, or the cities. No. But, there is, as is everywhere, but particularly up in the north, there are some pretty grotty towns and pretty grotty cities. And you can buy something cheap and rent it out. But you've got to look at what is going on sustainably in that area. Is it going down? Is it going up as an area? But also the type of people that are going to go and rent an area. Now, I'm not having a go at housing benefit, or DSS as we call it, because we all know we can't discriminate there. It's because quite often people got housing benefit can be some of the best tenants that we can ever have.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the culture, it's the type of people. I remember in a town not far from here, I had a landlord, and I said to this landlord, it's a street called Morgan Street. And I remember driving down it, and I knew straight away that I was a bit worried about this property when I was going to go and have a look at it. It was London. Actually, it was a London landlord, actually, funnily enough. And I went to Morgan Street. This is not my area. It's just up the road from me. And I went down this street called Morgan Street. And I knew it was a bit dodgy when there was a sofa outside the terraced house with two people smoking weed outside on it.
Oh,
and having
sounds
a cup
very
of tea.
comfortable.
And I just thought, yeah. And to the point, I tried to park my car right outside this house that I was going to go and see. And I told this landlord, Arif, his name was, I told him, I said, mate, just don't do this, please. It's like Baghdad round here. It is terrible. Please don't do it. And he still went and bought it. Anyway, the tenants left because it was tenanted. And within a week of those tenants leaving, the house got hit and all the pipework got taken, the boiler, the radiators, everything. It got stripped, this house. And he ended up selling it on auction. And I think he took about a £20,000 hit on it within literally a couple of months of actually buying it. It was a real shame. And that's what I'm trying to say. Certain areas, certain towns, you need to be very, very careful with. And when I talk about these places and I talk about Warrington, I think Warrington's quite posh. It is. There isn't really any streets in Warrington that are like that. I think that Warrington has been a working town that has gentrified over time.
Okay.
You talk about, there's a brilliant program called Manctopia about Manchester, and it's about the gentrification of Manchester. Well, it's the same here in Warrington. I think it is, we're having a gentrification going on in the Warrington area, and it's just premiumised. In the 15 years I've been here, it has premiumised. And as I was just mentioning right at the beginning of our chat here about employment, we've actually got very good employment in this area, and it's bringing a certain level of skill and employment. You'd be a complete numpty if you wanted a job. You could easily find a job in Warrington, easily, because the amount of jobs, even way before this crazy period of COVID and all that, the demand for jobs was outstripping the supply. We're having to pull in people from all different areas because there's just so much employment opportunity in the Warrington area. Yeah. And of course, with that employment brings a good calibre of person. So, Warrington's a good place to invest.
Okay, so
did I mention that, by the way? Did I mention that, Rachel?
So you can mention it as much as you like. I'm editing it out. Anyway, so forget the fact that people are going to move to Warrington to be able to commute to someplace else. You're actually going to have people commuting in to be able to work in Warrington. But it's interesting what you're saying. So yes, although I've mentioned various places up north that I've heard of, all of these places for me are just at the end of a motorway. So I have been to Warrington. Strangely enough, I used to work 2 days a week in Warrington and 3 days a week for the same company down in here. So, so I've been to Warrington. I know nothing about it apart from the fact that there was one place that did incredibly good bacon sandwiches. I think they're called Bacon Barns, I think they called them. Does that sound about right? bacon barns.
Okay.
And everybody seemed to have brown sauce in them. So why would I put brown sauce on this? It's ketchup. I want ketchup on this.
It's brown sauce. You have brown sauce with it.
No.
Definitely.
It's just
No. It's
like
brown sauce, not smart ketchup, brown sauce.
No, it's like when you go to Amsterdam and they offer you mayonnaise or whatever it is with your chips. It's like, no.
I have mayonnaise with my chips.
Oh, dear goodness me.
I have mayonnaise with my chips. I love mayonnaise with my chips.
Oh, you're so European up there in Warrington. Anyway.
We're very continental.
Very continental, that's it, yeah. But no, I mean, I think in terms of the dodgy areas, I think there are always dodgy areas in anywhere. So about 30 odd years ago, I used to live in a place called Dalston, which is sort of near Hackney and Stoke Newington, and it's sort of easty London. And it was a really, really rough place. It was, you get off the night bus and I would just run home. And I remember getting back to this flat and the lift doors opened and there was just this pool of blood at the bottom of the lift. It's like, yeah, I'm walking. Forget that, I'm running. But if I was to go back to the same flat now, it would be so expensive because the whole area is just very gentrified, as you say, very gentrified, very trendy, lots of restaurants, lots of bars, all the rest of it. But these things tend to just go through, those cycles, unfortunately. And there is that part of me that thinks maybe you should take that property with the boarded up windows and what have you, because in 20 years' time, it might be quite des-res. You never know, but it's a gamble I'm not going to take a long way from home. Definitely not. But one of the things the Wandering Turnip guy, who I'll come back to again, was showing was in some of these streets, the sensible people had fake windows. So instead of just it being boarded up or being actual window, they had like this painted on curtains and vases and stuff, which I thought was actually really quite clever. If you're in that situation, try doing that. It was really good.
It's probably the council's done that to make it look a bit better than what it really is, probably. The council's probably done that. Yeah. But
it was interesting you were saying about the sofa with people, discarded sofa with people sitting on top and smoking a joint. Because that sort of thing down here has resulted in licensing. So they've sort of used, particularly the fly tipping has been used as the reasoning behind the council for introducing selective licensing to hold landlords responsible, because it invariably happens in areas where you have a lot of rental properties and quite transient occupiers. But that's something that hasn't been introduced in your area yet. I say yet because I think it's going everywhere.
Yeah, obviously outside of HMOs and the requirements, obviously, of HMOs, normal residential property to rent out doesn't have any licensing requirements in Warrington whatsoever. And I know the housing team here really well, the environmental health officers. So, if there's a problem with a tenant or a house, we know them really, really well. And I spoke to Mike, who is part of that team. I've known him for years. And I said, will this ever come in Warrington? He said, there's no need to at the moment because we've got quite new modern housing stock generally in Warrington, and you don't have that issue. So hopefully...
So you don't have the issue with the fly tipping. Do you have the issue? Because the other half of why they said they brought it here is, part of it is antisocial behaviour, including fly tipping by tenants, but part of it is also properties not being up to scratch and landlords not behaving as they should do. Do you have that element of bad landlording as well?
I think you're going to get that a little bit in every area, but overall, it's not what I would call a prevalent problem. Mm-hmm. Not to my knowledge, anyway. Nothing that I could say on this podcast and go, no, we've got loads of landlords that have got issues with. There will always be some that are problematic, but I think, to be honest with you, you shoot yourself in the foot. There's great rents out there to be had at the moment. Why wouldn't you have a property that is good, fit for purpose, health, good from a health safety point of view, done up to good standard? Go and get a good tenant and have good rent coming in. Why wouldn't you do it? I just don't understand it, because I think as much as the market's tight, the tenants are savvy these days and they know their rights and they don't want to put up with rubbish. And I don't blame them, So I think there needs to be a balance had.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's just like, why would you not? I've always thought, why would you not give somebody a property that you think is decent, that you would live in yourself, that is, a good standard? Why would you not behave like that? I don't really understand why not. But I have noticed a lot of properties where, although they're safe, nothing wrong with them at all, they're perhaps not maintained to the standard that I think they should be. And I'm not a complete perfectionist, but, they're just sort of, this is looking a little bit tatty. You need to change the carpet. You need to change the kitchen cupboards, something like that. And people are just sort of, well, I don't need to because people will take it anyway. I'm seeing a lot more of that at the moment.
I would say yes. So I would agree with you that there is that more coming up at the moment. And I think that, as the market is so tight, if a carpet is okay, but ideally couldn't do replacing down the track, or, there's a couple of scuffs on the wall, but really doesn't need really repainting now. People are so keen to get into a property, as long as it's safe, clean, tidy, then I think generally it's okay. I don't think you need to make a property a palace. I don't think it needs to be absolutely amazing, but I think it needs to be nice and good job.
Yeah.
And very importantly, just for you to recognise what you just said about landlords who don't maintain properties. We've mutually parted with a landlord with 3 big properties that we've got, and we've known them for a long, long, long time as landlords. And over the years, they just wouldn't be proactive in doing the maintenance. But to the point that I would say the standard of what the tenants are living in now isn't to what we would see as an acceptable standard for the rent that the landlord's looking for. And we've mutually just parted way with that landlord. That is uncomfortable because I've thrown away quite a lot of income. But equally with it, there was quite a significant headache for us because it was bringing us and our brand and our business into disrepute. And it's transferred over to another agent, and the agent are going to pick up the same problems with that landlord. So we don't, what I'm trying to say, Rich, is we don't put up with it. We have an expectation that we have good housing stock, and that the housing stock that we manage, that we expect our landlords to look after those properties and maintain them to a good standard. It's important to do that.
I think you're right. I think it's one of those things that it's easier to do that as you grow. I think when you start off, you tend to accept, it's just like, oh, I need another property. Then you get more picky. Then you can start saying goodbye to people. And then you can also start saying to people, actually, I don't want to take that on. Thank you very much. But it is a balance.
That's the process. We literally the last 2 or 3 years, within 15 years, last 2 or 3 years, we've allowed a few landlords to roll off, should we say, where, how can I put it? Just nothing would be right for them. They wouldn't want to pay for the maintenance. If they pay for the maintenance, they'd be squabbling over £10-20 here and there. No appreciation for the sheer cost of everything that's gone up. They'd expect people to do everything for free. And those landlords we've filtered out because we want to work with people who are going to be nice people to work with, good people, you know. But, 15 years into the business, we've only just got rid of some of them. Rachel, it does take time. I've got to pay the bills at the end of the day, but we have filtered out what I call nearly all of those troublesome, because generally there's a rule of thumb, if they don't look after the property, they're usually a pain in the bum to deal with as well. Yeah. And they're just complete vampires of your time on your team's resources. And invariably, I can hear them and, the team come off the phone and they're exhausted, and it just drags the morale down of the team. Yeah, and I don't want that to happen.
I think that's very true. You do sometimes get some landlords and some tenants where you feel exhausted and drained after talking to them, and it's eventually you just think it's not good for the team, and it doesn't improve the service you give to everyone else. However,
it doesn't.
Back to the rents and everything. So, one of my concerns is I sit here and I look at the rental prices in Enfield, and I think, well, if you look at a studio flat, you're looking at around £1,000-ish. If you look at a one-bedroom flat, you're looking somewhere around the 1,200, 1,250 mark. If you look at a two-bedroom flat, you're looking at around 1,500. And I just think so I left home quite young and was renting. But I look at it now and I just think, if you're starting now, that's a massive amount of anyone's wages. And I don't know how people do it, unless you're sharing with someone or you're part of a couple or what have you. But that around here, and it was acknowledged by Enfield Council as well, I think, that they're expecting there to be a big growth in HMOs and shared houses. And that's something we're seeing a lot more people renting out their spare room, which obviously helps with paying mortgages and everything else. but also a general increase in HMOs. Is that something that you experience up there? Do you have the same pressures? I know $7.99 is much cheaper than $1,500, but do you have the same pressures?
Yeah. I think there's definitely obviously an emergence of HMOs. Well, actually, it went ridiculous. There was a lot of workshop stuff going on that was saying Warrington's a bit of a hotbed of HMO opportunity. So every man and their dog was coming in and asking us, have you got HMO? Do you know a house? What do you think this would be a HMO, etc.? And that actually massively backfired just before COVID, because there was, if you looked at Spare Rooms, which as you probably know is like the website for HMO rooms, there was a huge surplus of rooms available just before COVID. COVID, of course, was a bit of a mare for people with HMOs because, you know, you wanted to be away from people, didn't you? You didn't really want to be in an HMO environment. But in all fairness, I think that market has settled down a lot. And I think that market we have a lot of warehousing here in Warrington. And if, let's say, you're someone who's coming from the other part of the country or from another country and, you know, you want to just get a room with an ensuite and you want to work in Amazon or, you know, one of the big warehouses in the area, it's a great starting point in getting your feet into the area before you then start to commit to a higher rent or a bigger property, etc. So we have seen an emergence of HMOs, you know, quite significantly. I have equally seen, though, quite a few HMOs for sale, and I've actually seen quite a few HMOs actually being dissolved out of HMO and going back to private housing. So I've seen quite a transient sort of pitch. So I think that probably the HMO market in Warrington has kind of peaked out a bit for the moment, and settle down, you know, because there are new apartments being built. There are new Warrington's. We've got land, so there is still a lot of buildings still going on in the Warrington area, of which will be 2-bed, semi-detached, 3-bed, semi-detached, you know, apartments. Those are still being built, so there is still opportunity for you know, growth, should we say, rather than maybe in your area where it's like, so haven't got enough housing stock, so we're going to have to look at the bigger houses and turn them into HMOs in your area. We also don't have the type of housing stock to turn into HMO either, because we don't have that many streets that have got like all these big old houses that can be turned into 6, 7, 8-bed HMOs. We have housing stock that's more 4, 5-bed. And that sometimes, you probably know, starts to become a little bit more borderline on how much money you're really making out of the HMO. You need to be in a HMO, you need to be more 5, 6, 7, 8 beds in a HMO. Whereas when you're at the 3, 4, 5-bed territory, it's not as profitable.
It's not, but then the investment up front tends to be less, unless, of course, you're buying. Of course, you're buying an existing large one. So I was quite interested there that you're saying that there are people selling them, because obviously the landlord that we were speaking to, he had bought an existing HMO and he paid more for it because he was happy that he then didn't have to set it up himself. It already had planning permission, etc., already had a license, blah, 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 which I completely get, because there are so many different Article 4 areas around and change of usage things that you can or cannot do under permitted development, that it's a bit of a minefield. So when I see all these or hear about these courses saying, yes, absolutely, go and invest in an HMO, you know, a couple of 100 miles up, I just sort of think, but does the average person know? You know, you look at Enfield and you think, I can change this 3-bedroom property into a 4, possibly 5-bedroom HMO. You know, you're not going to be able to do that necessarily there, both because just size or what have you, but also because of the Article 4 or the general area or whatever. And that for me is all very concerning. Yeah. And there must be a reason that people are pulling out of it.
Yeah, I think what's happened here is it's more, one of the trends I have seen a lot more is, whereas someone has maybe traditionally gone and rented a 2-bed apartment themselves. So let's say there's some great apartments, we manage loads of them over in an area called Chapelford Village, which is west of Warrington. It's just a zone within the Warrington area. And pre-COVID, they were £650 a month. And they are now 800. They've just started to advertise them again for about £850 a month they are now. So there's been a big jump, you know, in the last 2 or 3 years. So pre-COVID, you would have quite often found those 2-bed, 2-bath apartments very importantly, that both the bedrooms are very similar in size, but also the main bathroom is fully tiled with a shower. So from a sharer's point of view, it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So what we found was, as a pre-COVID, you'd have found a lot of single occupancy in those 2-bed apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're finding a lot more dual occupancy. So it's quite often, 2 friends that are sharing and sharing the costs of it. And if you take in 50, add £250 worth of bills, like, gas, electric, water, council tax. So you're at what? So you're at 900, 1100.
Yeah.
So you're at £550 each per month. That's actually still a moderate percentage of someone's salary.
That's not bad at all.
Whereas I suspect, so I think the percentage of what they're spending on their salary, whilst I appreciate it's gone up quite a bit, I think it's probably a lot more reasonable down in your area, where I reckon what you're spending to rent down in your area, I think is probably quite a high percentage of their salary.
Yeah, it still is.
That's my suspicion.
Even for a house share, you're still looking at £700 plus, and that's moving into a all bills included type place rather than taking a place with a friend. Is much more.
So this is all leading to one thing, isn't it, Rachel? Just come and live in Warrington. just come and work and live in Warrington,
God.
and come and have a chat with Gary and the team at Belvoir Warrington.
No, I was actually waiting for something really mind blowing there. Come and live in Warrington. Great. Okay. God.
Oh, you're going to edit that bit out. Sorry.
Cut. Okay. Back to serious things now. I can't believe I fell for that. We're having a lot of fun down here with the court systems, and there has been a lot of press, and whether it's real or exaggerated, still a bit unclear, but with people issuing notice or serving notice because they want to be able to charge a much higher rent. So there's been lots of stuff in the press about that. Just remove your tenant, increase the rent massively, very unfair. And the court system, it's taking a long time. I think they were saying the average is like 13 months to be able to possess your property, and we had a 10-month one. Is that something you're experiencing around you, or have things stayed broadly
Not at all.
No,
not at all. We've obviously, by default, being a big agent, we're going to, occasionally be with our rent guarantee product. We're occasionally going to be representing the landlord and going to court, and we do that once every month, once every 2 months. And
really?
Generally the eviction proceedings is quick and fast, and the point to get to court is quick and fast as well these days. So no, we don't have an issue that. Yes, over the COVID period, like all of us, was a bit of a nightmare. And we've had our first one recently using that breathing space terminology. And then they used mental health, they used all sorts of excuses. But actually the judge in the court just got to a point where, no, enough's enough. I'm evicting you, end of. And then we had to, through our rent guarantee provider, instruct a bailiff. And again, that was only about 3-4 weeks from the instruction to getting a bailiff. I know you're not going to believe this, are you? I know.
It's a different world. I'm coming to Warrington. It's a different world. Wow.
I know. I always knew there was a disparity between what we were experiencing and what the South was experiencing, because I used to watch and love that program, Can't Pay, Won't Pay, with the bailiffs. I love it. It's
everyone's guilty pleasure, that one, I think.
But I was always gobsmacked. I used to be shouting at the TV like, why is it taking so long in the South, for everything to happen? And here, I remember one pre-COVID, it's very similar to here now, that if a tenant, 2 months into rent arrears and, our rent guarantee provider will go probably more likely for a Section 8 and, it'll go to court, and if required, a bailiff really, really quick. I mean, super quick. From first rent arrear to being evicted, I've known it being as fast as 4 months. That quick.
Well, we waited 17 weeks for a bailiff date.
Wow. It's bonkers. But
for the bailiffs, not the bailiff date, but for the bailiffs, yeah.
And the moment it's really good here, Rachel. Don't have an issue with it. It's annoying really, because about 400 yards from my office here is Warrington Magistrates Court, and they've moved all the evictions from Warrington to St Helens. So we have to drive up to St Helens, which is a bit frustrating. But we've got to know it now, and my team go up there and represent obviously the landlord with the brief on behalf of the rent guarantee provider, and it's very slick. It's very, very good.
That is really interesting because I'm very jealous that your timescales are so short, because the only time I've had to evict somebody and actually go to court over the last 8 years has been fairly recently. So I'm quite lucky. We don't go through it that often, but when we did, it was hideously painful. And the rent guarantee paid up, 10 months worth of rent guarantee paid up. So that was very, very good. But I know you have a very large portfolio, but to be going through it every other month, or to be, is there any commonality in that? Is it like a tenant type thing, or is it a property thing? A landlord's wanting a property? Why?
No,
that seems a lot.
I wouldn't say that this was anything to do with really the landlord wanting the property back or anything like that. I would say the trend is just more that when we've got to a stage where we're going to go to court, it's because the tenant has had a change of circumstances, basically can't afford the rent, buries their head in the sand, won't talk to us. And unfortunately, very sadly, despite every effort that my team will make, because we don't want a tenant to bill rent arrears up. It's a horrible situation. Our focus and always our mantra is gain vacant possession. Let's deal with the rent arrears after, but let's just gain vacant possession. And, if we got to that point, unfortunately, it's a failing situation, then obviously, sadly, then we'll instruct our rent guarantee provider to say we need to go to court, and we'll end up in court. And at the end of the day, if they're paying out the rent, they want to move on it quickly, don't they? Yeah. So it's not so much our actions and who we are, is they are, if you've got rent guarantee and they're coughing out £800,000-900,000 a month, they're not going to hang around, are they? They want to get it to court really, really fast and go for eviction. But I can't think of the last one, Rachel, where we've gone to court for eviction because of, let's say, the landlord kicking the tenant out to go for higher rent. I don't think we've had one. I don't think we've had one, genuinely. I think it's all been change in circumstances and ill health, mental health. Mental health is a big one these days. Really sad. And I'm amazed number of people where the circumstances changed. Mental health has really kicked in as a problem. They've lost their job, their life's gone to poo, and sadly you end up taking them through a legal process. It's horrible.
Yeah, that happened a lot. I found during COVID, we sort of really battened the hatches down, or whatever the expression is, during COVID, and spent a lot of time on the phone to tenants and landlords. And I'm exaggerating slightly, but it did feel at times like you were providing some kind of alternative therapy service or counselling type service or what have you. Because mental health during COVID was just horrendous. And for a lot of people, family, small place, it was hard, or just isolated. People just isolated. It's just, it was horrible for a lot of people. Depressing. However,
on to happy notes.
No, I'm not going on to a happy note. I'm just gonna sound slightly upbeat, and that will hopefully work as well. No, I was going to go back very quickly to HMOs because that was specifically what we had been, what a couple of landlords have said to us about going up and starting HMOs up north somewhere. Now, you don't do HMOs.
No.
Is there, and you said you did, but why did you change? What was it that made you stop doing it?
I think you either, as an agent, focus on it and do really well at it, because there is obviously a huge amount of extra legislation around it. The liability on you as an agent to ensure that you are maintaining compliance for yourself and the landlord is significant. And I don't take that lightly. And you're either going to do it and build the scale in doing it, or you're not going to do it. I personally found it a headache. And I'd done student properties and some HMOs for quite a while. And if I was to look at the headache factor of those versus what I call normal tenancies, without a shadow of a doubt, I found the HMO and the student stock definitely a headache. And I just made a conscious decision to take the feet out of it and say, this is not what we're going to focus on. And we tend to focus on 2-bed apartments at £850 a month, 2-bed terraces at £799, £850 a month. And we tend to have a lot of houses that are 3-bed to 4-bed, anything between £1,000, £2,000 a month. That's kind of our bag. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
So you could probably tell by the numbers. I know these are cheap numbers compared to where you are. But from a relativity point of view, we tend to not focus on the cheaper, lower end of the market.
Yeah.
We tend to focus more on the mid to upper end of the market.
Yeah.
And that's just what we chose to do. It was a conscious choice.
I would agree with you. I think we only do a couple of HMOs, only one that's a mandatory HMO now. And yeah, we've got it exactly how we like it. We know the people who are in it, but I've been offered a few HMOs and I look at them and I just think, no, this isn't for me. Just, yeah. There's lots of issues involved in the management of it, apart from the legislation and what have you. It's just the actual management of HMOs is much more intensive. There's more things that can go wrong, and there's more sort of people elements of it, which is quite
a lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts. If somebody gets damaged, no one will admit to the damage. If you end up with, if you've got someone who is a troublesome tenant, you'll have the other 6 tenants complaining about them.
Yeah.
It's just a constant headache. And that's what I'm saying. If you geared up for it, then your mindset is in that frame of mind to deal with it. But when you're not geared up for it, like we're not geared up for it anymore, we've chosen not to be. We just said that's not what we want to do. That's not our area of expertise. That's not what we want to do. So it was a conscious choice, for right or wrong. It was our conscious choice. We did actually choose specifically to not focus on that, and we chose to launch our estate agency side of our business. So it was more, we can only focus on so much. So we said, right, okay, because I resisted doing estate agency for a long time. I didn't use the tenant fee ban as an excuse to go into estate agency. I just felt I wanted a new challenge. So we launched sales, and we're, moving forward, and we're starting to do really well out of it.
With that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm conscious I could sit here and talk to you about this sort of stuff all day, but however, we're not going to. Just before we end, there was one thing I was going to ask you though, which is just sort of, if I was a landlord here in Enfield, crazily thinking about becoming a landlord in Warrington, what would you suggest? Where should I start?
So, first of all, I think there's a lot of landlords out there that are very armchair investors. And they actually, quite often, I'm staggered at this, where they'll invest money, they won't even look at the property. And, I'll often sort of say, come up, let's go and have a coffee. Let's go and have a look at the property together. Let me show you the area. See the whites of my eyes, see the whites of the eyes of the team, meet our feel. I'll show you the town. I'll show you the properties. I'll show you the reason why we're looking at properties in certain areas. And I do that as part of the view that hopefully I'll pick up the property management and we'll have a long working relationship going forward. And I think if you put the foundations in place as a relationship between the landlord and us as an agent and the property that they're going to invest in from there, it's relatable. If they've got more of an emotion. So when there's something down the track, a problem down the track, we can talk and we've got more of a personal experience. So that's what I always say is be personal about things. It's come up and have a chat. It's good train service, by the way, to Warrington, if you didn't know.
Oh, you hadn't mentioned that.
Yeah. Fastest train, 2 hours from London Euston to Warrington Bank Quay, 2 hours. Okay. I'll even buy you a coffee.
I think, just to ignore you completely there, one of the things that you just said there that was actually kind of ties into a theme that we've had is the need to have partners in everything that you do, whether it is your accountant, whether it's a mortgage broker, and whether it's an estate agent or letting agent. It's having that partnership, having your extended arm's length team who you can trust and who you depend on. And so getting to know the people, building that relationship. I think that's a lovely note.
As I say, I've got all these people to recommend. They don't have to use it by any means, but I've got all these people to recommend support as surveyor, accountant, great mortgage people. And these are all people who are either my friends or I use them myself or a bit of both.
Okay.
That gives a lot of credibility to the experience. It's a full turnkey package is what we offer.
Okay. So there you
go.
go.
All those lovely investors in London who want to come bring their money to Warrington.
So there you go. If you are listening, if you are an investor in the London area and you're thinking of looking up north, I would say Gary's definitely worth a chat to about the local market. And wherever you do decide to go, please do make sure that you do it wisely and not just because you've seen something on telly. On that happy note, Of course, don't leave Enfield. Enfield's wonderful. But on that happy note, Thank you very much, Gary. It has been very entertaining.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for having me today, Rachel. Thank you.
Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.